Hi, I'm Kate Edwards and welcome back to another video in RCK's brand new series where we are interviewing prominent women in business. We're going to be asking them about their stories, how they got to where they are today, and crucially asking them what they think companies can be doing to continue to champion and support women in business. Today I'm joined by Flavilla Fongang, who is an author, speaker and a multi-award winner. She is the founder of Black Women in Tech and also advertising agency 3 Colours Rule. Flavilla, welcome. Flavilla, can you start us off by talking about how your professional journey has developed and how you've got to where you are today?
Yeah, fantastic. So my professional journey really started when I decided to leave Paris. And people will probably wonder, why would you leave Paris when I think it's just beautiful? But I think the reality is when you live in Paris, it's really different when you're a tourist. And when I was doing an exchange program and I came to London, it was meant to be for 1 year and I didn't speak a word of English. Yes, and I fell in love with the city. And I always laugh because the first thing I watched on TV was EastEnders. And I think when I watch EastEnders, I realized, wow, anybody can make it in this country. You don't have to be young and blonde and size 8 whatsoever to make it. If you are talented and if you want to do something, you can do it. And that journey really led me to now being in this country for 20 years, more than 20 years now, which is amazing. But yes, so I've always been a study freak, but in a way that I was a tomboy, then I got put in the right direction. So I studied marketing and communication. And after graduated with a master's and 2 degrees, just because I love studying, and I was very tempted to do a PhD just because I love the idea of being called Dr. Fongang. But I said, Flavilla, you need to actually make some money. And yes, I worked in the oil and gas industry for some time, and which allowed me to really open myself to the world. I think I always say to people that, if you travel enough, you will say things are different, but if you haven't traveled enough, you say things are bizarre because you believe that your way is the right way. And the more I traveled, the more I realized how narrow-minded I was, and also the importance of diversity, not just from a culture point of view, ethnicity point of view, but gender and so much more. And yeah, so I always had a passion. I always had a passion for fashion, and for me, fashion was more than just a superficial element, but more in terms of your personal brand. So I understood personal brand before it was even a word, because I knew how it would get me to a lot of places just because I knew to dress well. And so I was giving advice to my friends, going on a date and so much more. And I said, I'm going to do it full time. So I became a fashion consultant. That's how 3 Colours was originally born. And I did that for some time, and I was working with lots of retail brands in luxury space. Spent a lot of time around Green Park, helping them with just reinventing how they can make their space more exciting, and then brands that also haven't survived, such as Debenhams or LK Bennett. And I realized, and at the time, my ex-boyfriend was a plumber. Never realized how much money plumber do make. I was like, wow, if I knew I would have gone to a plumbing business. But I always laugh because on his website at the time he used to have a boiler. And I said, what, you have a boiler on your website? He said, that's what I do. And I said, but that's what you do, but that's not what you sell. You sell the pleasure of being at home. And I didn't realize that was called branding. So I fell into branding. So I'm very much, even when I started my career as a fashion stylist, I self-taught myself. So what I've learned at university gave me the foundation, but then what I've done right now is for self-learning. And I've always believed that learning doesn't stop at just university. You should always learn new things, which I love. And yes, so I started my career in branding. That was sort of 3 Colours was transition into branding. And then, realized that quickly we were pretty much not applying the advice that we're telling our clients by not picking a specific niche. But one day, probably spending too much time on Twitter, I came across this video about this little young black girl who created a technology, a little app. I don't know if it's really an app, but technology that allowed kids to travel miles to go to schools and sometimes get lost, on their way back to find their way back. And I thought, oh wow, that's the type of people I really want to work with, people who are just change makers, who just see ideas and don't accept the abnormal norms. And yes, and then my journey led me to really just be more focused, working in the technology sector as a creative agency. And I realized that what a lot of brands were missing was this understanding of inclusive marketing, inclusive branding, but also personal branding, but also, employee branding. You say, they wake up when they're 1,000 plus or 100,000 plus employees and now they care about diversity. Well, it's really hard now and very expensive to change everything. And we work with brands and not just developing great brands, but creating brands that really relate to really different people. And that's a fundamental journey. But again, being an entrepreneur as I am, I'm always seeing problems that I want to solve. And one of them was who I could relate. I've understood part of being an entrepreneur is to network. And networking when I used to work in oil and gas was very much, just white men in the 50s in their suits. And I thought, wait a minute, technology can't be like that. Knowing that they are impacting so many people, we need to make sure we have diversity, not just from a female point of view, but also from an ethnicity point of view. And that led me to create GTA, Global Tech Advocates, Black Women in Tech, which now has become one of the largest network of Black women in tech in Europe, which is amazing. And I think what has been beautiful is that, as I'm building my own legacy and helping people get this as well, through creating stories, creating books that are distributed to schools for free in UK and Ireland, and we want to expand as well in other countries in Europe. One thing I wish I knew sooner is important of always giving before actually receiving. The more I give, the more I gave first, the more I got back. And people forget sometimes that when you start a business, you can be do you want to be a commodity or do you want to be a great brand? And the difference between the great businesses, a great brands do really well, they understand what is the impact that they're looking. So it's not just about providing trainers, it's about making people become the best athletes. So they go further. I'm talking about brands like Nike and whatsoever we've done go beyond. And I love to talk about that as, I was also as a keynote speaker.
So among many things, you're a brand strategist, author, international keynote speaker, BBC brand advisor and founder of GTA, Black Women in Tech and Tech Brains Talk podcast. Can you tell us about these podcasts, and is this something you've always wanted to do?
When it comes to podcasts, it's very interesting because as you network, what I love the most is just like, wow, your story is amazing. And I feel that sometimes some people don't realize what they carry with them. It can be so powerful. And for me, it was just a selfish act that I wanted to share with other people. And that's how my journey into creating my own podcast started. But again, very clear. I think the biggest issue in the technology sector is that a lot of businesses fail. A lot of tech startups don't make it to their third year or even their fifth year just because they didn't do the research phase, they haven't built a great MVP, and so many more. Or we don't understand the importance of branding and marketing. So we launch and hope for the best, that everybody's going to love their product and make so much assumption. And there's so much beauty in doing this podcast and having this conversation. And what I realized the most about those doing my podcast or being on other podcasts, as much as we talk about business, it's always about people. And those people who come and create and do things differently are just brilliant at what they do. And I think it's just, and if they can share their knowledge with other people, then that's brilliant. You can learn, you don't have to make all the mistakes if you can learn from somebody else. You get to your journey so much faster. And that's why it's beautiful about podcasts. That's why it's such a growing way of, of communication among so many.
And what challenges or obstacles did you face while you were building your career?
Not good. Where do I start? I think the first challenge that I faced was my accent. I remember when I left university and people said to me, oh my gosh, I still remember this recruitment female said to me, like, your accent is so strong, I don't think I'll be able to find you any job. And something like that, can you get people who are really, who don't have that self-confidence can go back, I'll go back to France and live my life. And for me, that I use that as reverse psychology. Well, I'm going to show you I'm going to make it. And actually, my accent has helped me because I think that's also what is part of my personal brand. I've been in 20 years, I still have that, people say strong French accent, but it's part of the charm. And frankly, for me, French accent is very light, But I think one thing is, that, when you're a foreigner and understanding, culture, French people are very direct, which come across as rude. We're adapting to that, that culture in England. But also, I think there's also objectification of women. If you are beautiful, then you can be one or the other. You can be beautiful and also intelligent. And I like to prove that there's so many beautiful and intelligent women around the world, and I love to meet them and also put them on a pedestal. There's so many obstacles that you face as a woman that, and I always say to women, be prepared for it. And don't let this stop you from your greatness. And others will be good for you. You don't have to be, you're not for everyone, and not everyone is for you. And I've stayed in people where I felt appreciated, and then where I didn't feel appreciated, I just left. And I think that's so important.
So nowadays, what does your day-to-day role look like?
My day-to-day job looks like, at the moment, is very much in the strategy, more growth, and raising my profile, continue to raise my profile as a leader. And I think it's so important because I think as women we don't realize that there's so so many young individuals out there who are looking for inspiration, and the more we put ourselves out there. That's why I say to all the leaders that we work with, I say, like, your personal brand is not for you, it's for the next person who needs to see themselves in you, and that's so important. So yeah, my day-to-day is more in terms of a strategic level conversation, helping my team, build great projects for the brands that we work with. And alongside that, I feel that I spent, for the last 15 years being in my field, my journey is now to, spend a lot of time in educating as well, like giving back to that community, and that's what I love to do anyway. And yes, so having a good life balance. I think I would say that don't spend all your life just into one part of what is important. I think there's this very big misconception that the only way to be successful is through money, which is really wrong. And I think success comes in so many different forms, and success is having a good family balance, success is having time for yourself, success is having family, success is all of these things that is not just money. I think we glorify so much with Forbes list, having $1 million businesses, and all these people who have been on the top of the cover, on the cover of Forbes magazine, where are they right now and what they've lost. And I've learned a lot from my mentors who were successful multimillionaire who had nothing around them, and I didn't want to wake up and be that person where I've just have a business and then nothing else.
You have influenced many women throughout your work and outreach. Have you got a particular highlight along this journey?
It's a very difficult question that you're asking me, because there's so many things that I enjoy, but I've achieved, I enjoyed. But I think the one that I've always enjoyed the most, and that's probably the title, despite all the titles that I have, the one that I love the most is being an enabler. And I do that through the brands that we work with, enabling their greatness, what they're trying to achieve, but also within my team, what they're able to achieve. And they start somewhere and they become someone bigger and stronger and more high performer. But also, creating a book. When people told me, you don't need to create a book that tells the stories of Black women, and starting this journey against all the odds who told me don't do it, and now say I'm glad you didn't listen to me, and I'm glad I didn't listen. And having this book, this book in the hand of other kids, because I didn't have that when I was young. I wish I had that. Probably my journey would be different. But I didn't turn out so bad. But yes, having this book and building the legacies of others as I'm building my own is definitely my highlight. And knowing that these books now that recreated the Voices in the Shadow are archived at the British Library, it's fantastic, something I'm really proud of. So yes, for all the people listening, if you believe in something so strong and you think it's important, don't give up.
So what would you say to women who are starting off on a similar journey to yourself? How would you encourage them, and what advice would you give them?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think the first thing that I would say is that it doesn't matter how good you are if you don't have the right network. Spend most of your time building your network. It's so important. Anything that I've achieved right now is thanks to my network. People who trusted me and have made the right introductions. So, when I was employed, what I did at lunchtime was sit at my desk and be on Facebook and eating my lunch, which was probably a mistake. I just talked to my department that I was managing. But what I should have done is go to the other department leader and, hey, should we go for lunch and chat? Because that's really where it happens. It doesn't happen, your work is not enough. It's about the small talk. It's a game, let's be honest, it's a game that we play. And a lot of people have seen people in a great position who are not as talented that others should be there. So I would say spend a lot of time building your network. It's so important, the network within the company, but also externally. Go one networking event month, start with one event, do once a week or whatsoever. And the more you build your network, the more opportunities come to you. People say to me, how did you get into the BBC? It was just because I built my network, and also my friends say, hey, I would like to do that. I didn't have to do any application. The job was given to me. And it's because I spent a lot of time as well being good at advocating my strength and my expertise. There's so many great platforms out there that allows you to just share and being present. So building your personal brand and having a great network is really what complements your ability to really start a great business.
And what do you think companies themselves can be doing to continue to champion and support women in business?
I think there's so many things companies can be doing when it comes to championing women. I think first thing first is recognize where you are and be honest about your journey and what you want to achieve. So part of that as well is to think in terms of what is relevant for my industry. You don't have to tap into all the societal issues, but what are the relevant ones to your industry? And is it woman? Is it, is it ethnicity? Is it, sexual orientation? God knows, whatever it is. But be clear in terms of what you want to do and do it right. Don't do it just for publicity, but be intentional and also follow up. And I think one thing that companies can do is creating their own initiatives. Like me, when I created my own initiatives, now it became its own business. Or just the idea of, I'll bring Black women tech to discuss and allies, talk about diversity and see. And then, out of nowhere, it became 12,000 people around the world, which is insane and still growing. But I would say, think about what initiative is relevant to your industry and use that as also bringing all your employees to support you in that journey.
And is there anything else you'd like to add at all?
I think I would like to add, I would say that probably the only thing I would like to add is that, enjoy the journey. Don't look at just what's next. I think sometimes it's good to step back and appreciate what you've achieved. The end goal shouldn't be the only moment of happiness. If you don't enjoy the journey, then you're missing out. What is the point of being an entrepreneur? If you feel that, you resent and I always tell people, being a nation, being clear in terms of who you want to work with will give you so much sanity. If you do work that you don't enjoy, you're never going to be great at it. You're just going to put the bare minimum. But I think having clarity and enjoying, I remember when I said that on stage and somebody just cried. I was like, oh my gosh, did I trigger you? She was triggered. I said, pick a niche, be clear in terms of what you want, being intentional. I think sometimes people just wait, okay, the word will come to me. But when you let the word decide for you, you don't get what you want.